So picture this. You've just spent months, maybe even years, totally immersed in a massive qualitative research project. You've done dozens of interviews, you've sifted through literal mountains of transcripts, and you have finally crafted what you think is a beautifully written, deeply insightful paper. You submit it to a top-tier journal and bam, here comes the feedback from reviewer 2. Great story, good writing, incisive thinking, but how do we know you haven't just made up an interesting interpretation? Ouch, right? It is the universal sting that pretty much every qualitative researcher has felt at some point. It's the ultimate dilemma of inductive research. How do you actually prove your brilliant insights aren't just, thin, impressionistic fiction? Well, welcome to this explainer, because today we are tackling that exact dilemma head on. We're going to dive deep into the Gioia methodology, which was developed by Dennis Gioia, Kevin Corley, and Amy Hamilton. Look, this approach is essentially the ultimate solution to proving that qualitative research does not have to be dismissed as mere impressionism. It is a highly systematic, structured approach to inductive research that's specifically designed to bring undeniable qualitative rigor to your work, all while preserving that creative, revelatory magic that makes qualitative studies so great in the first place. All right, here's our roadmap for today. We'll kick things off with the qualitative rigor dilemma, then unpack agents, concepts, and constructs. Next, we'll walk through first and second order analysis, followed by building the data structure. After that, we'll explore the grounded theory model, and finally, wrap up with writing the compelling story. Let's jump in. Section 1, the qualitative rigor dilemma, the need for hard evidence. So the brutal reality of academic publishing is that journal reviewers, especially at top-tier publications, demand completely transparent proof. They approach qualitative research with this classic, almost rigid scientific skepticism. They really just want an answer to one simple question: where is the evidence for your assertions? They need to know for sure that you haven't just cherry-picked a few convenient quotes to fit a clever, preordained narrative and then slapped a sexy label on the whole thing. To get past that kind of skepticism, we need to build an absolutely undeniable evidentiary chain. Section 2. Agents, Concepts, and Constructs. The foundational philosophy behind the method. Now, how exactly do we build that chain of evidence? Well, it all starts with our underlying mindset about the very people we're studying. The Gioia methodology hinges on this really crucial assumption. The people constructing their organizational realities are knowledgeable agents. Simply put, it assumes your informants are smart. They are fully capable of explaining their own intentions and actions. This instantly shifts the entire dynamic, casting us, the researchers, initially as just glorified reporters. Our first and most important job is to give an adequate account of the informant's experience without imposing our own prior theories or biases onto them. We aren't forcing them into our theoretical boxes. We're listening to the boxes they've built for themselves. And why is that kind of deep listening absolutely crucial? Well, this classic quote from Albert Einstein pretty much hits the nail on the head. Not everything that can be counted counts, and not everything that counts can be counted. If we want to deeply understand socially constructed organizational experiences, the messy human side of how organizations actually function, we can't simply rely on measuring occurrences or counting variables. The true essence of the organizational experience often lives in the totally unquantifiable meaning that people attach to their everyday actions. So the really important distinction to make here is the difference between constructs and concepts. Constructs are measurable, quantified variables that act as extensions of existing knowledge. They're great, sure, but they keep us rooted entirely in what we already know. Concepts, on the other hand, are like these little sparks of meaning. They're more general notions that capture meaning and actually act as the precursors to concepts. The authors argue that as a field, focusing way too much on refining rigid constructs means we are often just sharpening the wrong tools. What we really need to be doing, the arguably much more important work, is developing brand new concepts. We need new tools for new insights. Section 3. First and second order analysis. Processing that raw data. Okay, so how do we actually find these new concepts? Well, we build them from the ground up. The first stage is open coding. And let me be real with you. It is necessarily chaotic. You're out there conducting semi-structured interviews, making extraordinary efforts to use the informant's exact terms. Because you aren't imposing an existing theory, the number of categories just explodes early on. It's totally normal to generate 50 to 100 initial categories from just your first 10 interviews. You're going to look at this massive, towering pile of data and probably experience an overwhelming feeling of panic. But do not worry. This is quite literally part of the design. As the authors wonderfully put it, you got to get lost before you can get found. This messiness, It's the fertile soil for real discovery. And from that chaos, we begin a highly systematic refinement process. We move from the first-order informant terms through a sort of funnel of synthesis into second-order theoretical themes, and finally distill those into overarching aggregate dimensions. Oh, and a quick pro tip here from the authors. Always have a co-researcher play devil's advocate during this process. It helps ensure you don't get too close to the informant's perspective, which is a big risk known in the biz as going native. Section 4. Building the data structure. Creating visual proof of your rigor. This brings us to the absolute pivotal step of the entire research approach. The authors use a guiding mantra for this phase, and they deliver it incredibly forcefully. No data structure, no nothing. Constructing a data structure is not just some boring formatting exercise. It forces you to step up in abstractness. It compels you to start thinking about your data theoretically rather than just methodologically. It's about connecting the lived, on-the-ground experience of the informant with that 30,000-foot view required for serious theoretical insight. When you look at a complete data structure, it functions as the ultimate defense against reviewer skepticism. Just moving from left to right, you can clearly trace how raw first-order concepts flow directly into second-order theoretical themes, and how those distill even further into aggregate dimensions on the far right. It acts as a guided visual tour of your brain. It proves to the readers exactly how you progressed from raw data to overarching themes. It shows them beyond a shadow of a doubt that you didn't just cherry-pick your findings, you systematically built them. Section 5. The grounded theory model. Putting the data in motion. But we can't stop there. While it's absolutely crucial, the data structure is really just a static photograph of your findings. It's the anatomy. To truly understand a process, we need to put that photograph into motion. So we translate the static anatomy of the data structure into the dynamic physiology of a grounded theory model. By bringing in boxes and arrows, we show the dynamic interrelationships among all those emergent concepts. The arrows are what literally set everything in motion. The resulting model answers the how and why these concepts interact, giving us a vibrant inductive model that fully describes or explains the phenomenon. Section 6. Writing the compelling story. Drafting the final narrative. Because here's the thing. Having a rigorous analysis is only half the battle. You need to present it in an intellectually and emotionally compelling narrative if you want to land in a top-tier journal. When writing your findings, the authors recommend using a magnifying glass strategy. You don't just mechanically list out every single theme like a grocery list. You zoom in on the most insightful, surprising, emergent concepts and hold them up for examination. Furthermore, your narrative must be heavily suffused with direct informant quotes. This is critical. By explicitly linking your text narrative back to the first-order codes in your data structure, you send a powerful meta-message to the reader. Hey, this is exactly what the informants told us. We are not making this stuff up. And as you wrap up your discussion, you must aim for transferability. Look, pure interpretivists will sometimes argue that qualitative case studies are purely idiosyncratic, that they only apply to that one specific setting and nowhere else. But the authors fiercely disagree with that. Even a grounded theory from a single case study can generate formal propositions or extract concepts that act as a roadmap for future researchers. The whole goal is to prove your findings are portable. You are using your specific case to generalize to broader theory, providing brand new tools for quantitative and qualitative researchers alike. Which leaves us with this final, somewhat provocative thought to challenge your own work. As a researcher, are you spending all your time to sharpening the wrong tools, endlessly refining existing constructs that actually limit what we can know? Or by embracing a systematic, highly rigorous approach like the Gioia methodology, are you ready to build incredible new ones? The qualitative world is incredibly rich with undiscovered concepts, and now you've got the blueprint to find them and prove them. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I really hope this empowers you to bring undeniable qualitative rigor to your next big discovery.